Well, I want to first just thank you so much for taking your time to share your story with me. And especially, I know you're going to talk about it, but with your background,
Mhm.
you've had obstacles that you've faced, obviously infertility, or well, you'll go into that more,
Mhm.
and culturally,
Mhm.
and how that's faced you. I'm looking forward to hearing your story.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for joining me, Christina. So let's get into it because I have a feeling that we have a lot to talk about.
For sure.
Um, so let's start where I love to start with the beginning of your journey. When you felt, how old were you? Because a lot of people like to know that. How old were you? And how did you know that you would need some help in this journey of yours?
So I think I probably needed help from the very beginning. You know, so I had my first daughter in 2013. So I was 33. She took 11 months to conceive. So, at that age range, your OB is like, after a year, come see me. And then in the 11th
Right.
month, we had a baby. So we got pregnant. So he had left practice after my daughter was born, a couple years after she was born, and he had insinuated that with the second, because your first took so long, you may need help. And he had recommended the fertility specialist we ended up going with. Um, 2 years after my first daughter was born, Sophia, I had a miscarriage. We weren't really trying, but we weren't preventing at that time either. Um, and my OB, I like facts and directness. And so he was very direct. He's like, you had a miscarriage, but your body did what it was supposed to do. I don't have to do any additional procedures. My body got rid of it fairly quickly. And so he's like, but it's, you can get pregnant, but if you're having issues, you're going to need to maybe see a specialist. Um, so then around 2017, we were ready to really try because nothing was happening in that time period. And because my OB had left practice, I just booked an appointment with whoever was available. The second OB, she was ready to put me on a letrozole kind of regimen. Um, but my labs that afternoon came back that my A1C was high. So I was diabetic. And
Oh, wow.
she was like, you need to manage it before I can prescribe this for you to try. And I managed it really quickly with diet and exercise. I was making very poor choices at the time. You can't eat a donut and iced coffee every day.
It would be nice.
Yeah, it would be really nice, right? Um, when I got it managed, she was still like, I think you should still lose more weight. And I was just like, this is like, I'm never going to be a model. So like, she just, and I just never was comfortable with her 100%. And so, it kind of made me stop trying, to be
Mm.
frank. I did control the diabetes and I went on a journey of health and got into Soul Cycle. If people look at my social media, you'll see that it's a really big part of my life because it's really how I got healthy again, physically. But mentally, I still was never in that space. And then we were kind of ready around, I think, late 2018 or so to try to really try. But at this time, I said, I'm going to change OBs. So I switched OBs to actually, coincidentally, the OB who did my C-section with my first. So what
Mm.
my original OB, who I loved, wasn't the one who delivered my daughter. But this OB that I have now is the one who did her C-section. My birth story is very similar to yours, by the
Oh
way.
my gosh.
I everything you would post, I felt you 100%.
Wow.
I
Wow.
totally get it. We could have that conversation another day.
Yeah,
There's
sounds
a lot of
like
healing
it.
that has to happen for that, but
Yes.
the disappointment I totally get. And in my first appointment with that OB, he was just really, I love directness and honesty. He's like, I don't want to waste your time at this point, because I was like 38. He's like, you just need to go straight to the fertility specialist. He also recommended the same group. We ended up going with the same doctor that my first OB had recommended because he thought I would really like her. And so, Yeah, I probably needed help from the very beginning, but it really wasn't until that third OB and in 2018 that we just followed his advice and went straight to um, the fertility specialist. And here we
Wow.
are.
Yeah. I mean, how amazing though you were able to get pregnant. It took what, 11 months you
Mhm.
said. And I mean, that was a while ago, I guess. So did you do anything different that you could remember in the process of trying to conceive that you felt like contributed to being successful?
Well, so when we met with the fertility specialist, she was really upfront that because of my age, her recommendation would be to go straight to IVF. And I was
Okay.
not ready. I wasn't quite there. And so I wanted to start with IUI. On the second IUI, it did take, but then in February of 2019, we miscarried again. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay. That was a little bit different of a miscarriage than my first. It took a little bit interventions. But when I walked out of that appointment, after the miscarriage, um, they were like the fertility group was like, you don't have to make a decision. And I'm like, no, our next step will be IVF when I'm ready, because I just couldn't go through that again. And so I took a long time to go back. I feel like,
Mm.
it happened in like January, and then in February, they were like making sure everything was good. And they're like, whenever you're ready to try another IUI, we can do it. And I'm like, no, I'll call you when I'm ready to do IVF. And it took a couple months. I wasn't there. And finally, I think around the end of April, in 2019, I called them and I was like, I'm ready. Let's do this. And by then I felt like I was, I had been on this physical journey of getting healthy. And I think mentally I was strong to go through it, or prepared as you could be mentally to go through it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
think that's good. Because, you know, on one hand, I mean, I've been on this infertility journey for a very, very long time, but there have been spaces like, that I have had the mindset of go, go, go. I'm ready to do this. Let's go. But then just like you, there's been times where in those 10 years that I've said, I'm going to put this on the back burner because I just emotionally and mentally cannot handle it. um, so I think that's important to acknowledge that and to know, okay, what can I handle? What can't I handle? And am I really ready to go through this? So that's
and you
good.
need a lot of support, and that's where the cultural piece comes
Yeah.
in. I'm half Korean, I'm half Mexican, and from the Korean side, I think my mom initially was very like, this is maybe you're cheating science, or something. And but she she's around us a lot. She's helps take care of our daughters, and so I think when she saw what I was going through, I think she felt a lot more comfortable with it. On the Mexican side, there it was just very flippant, like, it's gonna be okay, just relax. And and but yet they're the side that's like, when are you having a second?
Yes.
It's just like, okay, you guys can't have this both ways. Like, we're trying, but like at the same time. And then there's definitely some fertile myrtles on my husband's side, especially. Yeah,
I'm sure.
it's just hard to. So every holiday, like, I'm pregnant. I'm just like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's so hard. So hard. I'm sure you had a lot of questions about when you would have the second one, right?
No, I mean, it never ends, right? When you're dating, when are you gonna get married? And then when you're married, when are you gonna have a kid? Then when you have a kid, when are you gonna have the second? And then now we have two girls, and there have been a few comments here and there from
Oh my
people who don't know
gosh.
my story, who are like, are you gonna try for a boy? And I'm like, absolutely not. You have no idea what you're asking.
My gosh. Too much, too many questions.
Yeah.
So before you like dove into like with the RE, assuming your RE, they tested you for everything.
Hmm.
Did you get any procedures or surgeries done prior to the treatments?
Yeah, one of your questions was, what was your diagnosis? It's that unexplained secondary infertility, which I'm like, what is
Yeah,
this? That's a real thing.
it's not.
Yeah, I mean, My AMA, everything was pretty good, like where it should be. Nothing was
Okay.
alarming. Um, we did like our own genetic testing. My husband was very proud. He's perfect. His stool panel was perfect. Mine had one
Funny.
minor like digestive protein thing, so, physically we were both good. It just, I think your husbands want to say it's just more sex. It's like, no, it's not really.
Yes. Mine loves to say, "Oh, let's just practice. We get to practice more." Oh,
But yeah, I
tricky.
mean, we did the egg retrieval, we did genetic testing, while waiting for that. I did do an ERA for the receptivity, I think it is.
So how, okay, so go back to the egg retrieval. What did those numbers look like? How many eggs did you have or get? How many eggs were taken out?
17, 14 fertilized. They
That's
ended up
great.
sending 9 for testing, and out of 9, we had 3 normals.
Okay.
Out of the
And
9,
and you're how old at this point?
38, I think.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and so it's kind of crazy because out of the 6 that were abnormal, they were all boys. So when it came time to
Wow.
choose which embryo to put in, I was like, whatever. My husband was a little bit, I think, freaked out. He's like, let's put in a girl. We had one boy, and we still do, but yeah, the 6 abnormals were boy embryos.
Wow. So you had three chromosomally normal
Hmm.
after testing, and they were two girls and one boy.
Hmm.
Wow. We do have very similar
Yeah.
stories.
And I will say for me, I know this journey is really tough for people. And like I told earlier, I'm really into facts and kind of the science. And my husband is too. I mean, he works for a company that does genetic testing. Um, so one of the things that my RE had put into terms for us, which was really helpful for me, and she's very direct. And I know I have met people who did not like her, so, which I totally get because she is very direct. But she had put it in the term of time. So she's like, 17 eggs is 17 months of cycles, right? 9 embryos and 6 being abnormal is potentially 6 more miscarriages you could have had, right? So when she put it in those terms for me, because I think at first I was like, only 3 are normal. I really like the gravity of that was just really impacted me to know, like, you're not cheating anything. You're really saving a lot of, in my opinion, heartache. Because that is a long time I would have spent. And then even with 17 healthy eggs, I ended up with 3 normal embryos. That's a lot of pain to go through.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. When you put it in that way, I mean, it really helps to put things into perspective.
Hmm. It makes
Wow.
it so important why I think IVF should be automatic when you're having trouble. It shouldn't be so hard for people to
Right.
get, because it really saves a lot of time and heartache in the end if you view it from that way.
I mean, how many stories do you see of recurrent pregnancy loss? Oh, just month after month after month, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, no matter how you find a way to go through it, I think for me, both times I found really positive ways to go through it. It doesn't make going
Mhm.
through it any easier. And
Yeah.
then, really when I had Emily, this one, I didn't really celebrate being pregnant literally until they were putting my spinal tap in for the C-section. Because then the nurses and
Mm.
the doctors, the anesthesiologists were like asking me about it. It's the first time I cried happy tears about it, because I knew at that point nothing bad was going to happen, hopefully, right? Like when you've had a recurrent loss, like it really takes away from the joy of being able to enjoy being pregnant, because I always just felt like something bad could happen. I mean,
Yeah.
even when you get to the safe spots, the 12 weeks, the 14 weeks, I still never never was joyful about it, you know, until that moment in the OR. Like, then I'm just
Gosh,
crying on the table, like, I'm gonna have a baby.
then you let it go.
Oh,
I've
I let
seen
it all
so many
go.
women talk like that,
Mhm.
and so many women can relate to you. You know, like you said, you go from one mark to the next mark, and you just, if I can just get to that point, and then you
Mhm.
get there, and like if I could just get to the next one. So yeah, I get it. So take us back to that. You know, you found out you had two girls and a boy. And then did you do a first trans? No, you couldn't. You did a frozen transfer because they were
Mhm.
tested. So how much longer after the retrieval did you do your frozen transfer?
Yes, I think the retrieval was around May or June. I think it was like in June actually.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
and we did the transfer, I think, in August. So, and
Okay.
she, you know, held my breath for 2 weeks. Um, she took, and
Nice.
here I am with a Spitfire child.
That is awesome. So yeah, it's so funny because you say like our girls are, did you say one day apart?
Yeah, because Valentina was what?
22nd.
Yeah, so 21st.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
So yeah, we had our transfer in July, but because she came out so much later than she was supposed
Yeah.
to, that makes sense that you had
Hmm.
yours in August. It was almost a month later that she came out. So yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. So you had the retrieval, and then the next month you basically skipped because you had to wait for the testing,
Hmm.
and then the following month in August you did it.
Yeah, and I think while we were waiting for testing, is when we did the ERA that next
That's
cycle,
right.
uh,
Okay.
which
And then what happened with that?
it was normal. Whatever
Okay.
hours they wanted showed that. So we're, you know, I have to say we're really fortunate because of my husband's company that like 90% of this is all covered. I mean,
Oh, that's
so for
amazing.
me, sometimes I feel a little guilty because I know a lot of people when they're going through IVF, there's so many components of it. And the financial piece is really a hardship and a really tough part of the journey for a lot of people. And for us, fortunately, it was not. We his I mean, we got really lucky. They covered all the genetic testing, you know, like it's just so for that we were extremely grateful, and we
Yeah,
realized the privilege we have in that piece of our story, that
that's
financially the
wonderful.
burden wasn't anything crazy for us.
Yeah, that's really, really wonderful. I think you're the first person I've ever heard say that the employer took over what you said, 90%.
Hmm.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's one part that like I said, sometimes I feel guilty when I know other people who go through IVF and how hard it is, because that just wasn't a piece for us that we had to stress out too much about. And just goes to why I think it's so important, like employers and healthcare plans. I mean, it should be covered. That shouldn't be. I mean, you save so much
Yeah.
on
It's
the.
pretty unfortunate that it is the way it is right now, and hopefully in the future that will change.
Yes, hopefully. I mean, it's. I know that there are certain states that I think, like New York, has some coverage or something built in. So hopefully, it just
Yeah.
starts to become the norm.
Yeah.
Because I think you know, it's amazing that you can hopefully prevent recurrent loss.
Hmm.
And we ask women to go through so much, and then to have to go through that just seems really
Yeah,
unfair.
for sure. It's that for sure. You're absolutely right. I'm curious, what was Emmy's, what was her grade, her embryo grade?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I have that. I
Oh
want to
yeah.
say it was a 5 or 6, maybe. Those are the high ones, right?
Uh-huh. 5 or
Yeah,
6, and then the letters.
5.
Like if
Yeah,
she was an AA or a B or BB.
I want to say she was an AA.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think she was the best one. Um, I think the boy was. It was still good, but not the best. So
Yeah. Yeah. How fascinating. Valentina was a day 6 embryo. which, for me, you always hear, oh, day 5 is, really good. But now as I'm talking to women, I've heard amazing stories that it could be a day 3, it could be a day 5, it could be a day 7. So I try to encourage them into like, just don't get stuck on that,
Yeah, and see, I'm not, because I don't even know. I think
which
in
is
some ways I was
amazing.
naive. I just really listened to the recommendations of my RE, and
Yeah.
they gave us a lot of choice in which one to choose, and we kind of said the best one, which happened to be a girl, which like I said, eased my husband, I think, a little bit.
Hmm.
But and I think that's why she really, when she gave me the results, she was really big on that like time factor, that 6 abnormal ones would have been 6 miscarriages for you. And so I think I got away from the scoring and, you know, thinking like I only have 3 out of 17 eggs retrieved, and because it only takes one.
Right.
So, I wasn't too hung up on that. And I also realized
Yeah.
now that I've been kind of in this world, I realized how amazing it is. I was able to get on the first round and on the first transfer. I mean,
Yeah.
I see people going through multiple rounds, and I had told my husband when we started, I'm only doing 1 round. I
Mm.
know I cannot do more than 1 round. I just
Yeah.
knew physically and mentally I couldn't do more than 1 round. And so for me to have it take, I also realize how lucky I am in that aspect.
Wow. Wow. And those conversations are very, very important to talk about before going into it, whether you're willing to do more than one. I know
Mhm,
we definitely did that. We talked a lot about, okay, what's your plan A, all the way to plan F,
mhm,
and talking about all kinds of things, fostering and adopting and whatever it took to build our family. So I do consider myself blessed to be able to have a daughter from the first round as well.
mhm,
Not the first transfer, but the first round.
mhm.
So your first daughter is how old?
She's 7.
She's 7. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then Emmy is 8 months,
Gonna
right?
be 9 months this month. Yeah.
Soon. Yeah. Yeah. So, sometimes I ask girls, where are you at on your journey now? Um, how are you feeling?
You're never, I think that's where I'm at in the journey, is when do I make that step of kind of really being done?
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes I feel weird that I'm not like in the world anymore because it was successful, and there's that guilt, kind of like outsider. Now I'm an outsider. And I haven't quite reconciled all that either. Um, I do try and cheer on people because really, from this, internet strangers became virtual friends, right? And so I try and cheer on those people. But sometimes I still feel like an outsider because for me, that part is kind of done.
Hmm. Well, I think I totally get it, and your feelings are validated for sure. Just seeing you, you know, you were faced with obstacles just like so many of us. And you having to overcome that and to deal with that emotionally and all other ways, there's a place for you in the
Hmm.
community, no matter what. So we all have different stories, every one of us. I mean, there's not one person that I've talked to so far that has an exact story.
Hmm.
They're similar but not exact. So and just some of us have it a little bit easier than others,
Hmm.
but we all belong in the community. And
And I think that's the biggest message, for anyone watching this, is that it it is a similar road we're all on, but maybe our cars are all different, or you're using the wrong tires, or like your car has the wrong tires, or your car needs repair, or it just we're all going down the same road, but
right.
everyone's journey is incredibly individual to them still, but you find support where you need it. And for me, it was really internet strangers. I mean, if you scroll back to my social media at that time, I'm very open. I was very open about when transfer was. The joke on my social media for a long time was like, because I was so open about it, I would say like, I am pregnant, but this is not an announcement. So my hashtag was like, not an announcement, still not an announcement, but I was wanting to be really open with people that this is the journey that, I'm getting tested. I can see ultrasounds and see that there's a baby there. But to me, I was never quite comfortable to say like, oh, we're pregnant. It was just always like hashtag not an announcement, hashtag still not an announcement.
So did you ever have an announcement?
I did. And I realize now, it was probably in poor taste, but I did it on our holiday card. And I know that that's also a debate in the infertility world about it can be triggering for people to see it on holiday cards. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, but I think my family and friends who knew the journey got that this was probably how we'd announce it, right? So
Exactly. And that I have a hard, I'm not saying about, I don't know. You to each their own,
mhm,
because you find that if you are worried about hurting someone, you're basically going to be in hiding
mhm,
about your whole journey. You know what I mean? Because there's always someone who is going to get offended by something. Um, and I know, and just like how it is in the community where we say, just mute me or just unfollow me. If I know that it can be very painful.
mhm,
So I totally understand if you have to do what you have to do.
mhm,
But yeah, for me, I had to ask myself the question, when do I allow that to not be excited about my journey,
right.
because I worked damn hard for this, know?
Yeah, and
And
it's not
you want to
pie,
be able to
right?
talk about it.
It's
Yeah.
not pie because you and I had successful stories doesn't mean that we take away from the ability of someone else to have a successful story as well.
Right.
And I think
Right.
it's remembering that because it was hard for so many years, especially with my first. I was in a internet moms group, and people are having their seconds and thirds, and some people their fourths and fifths. And it's hard to watch that. So I watched it for 6 7 years, right, of people announcing their siblings, because for me this was about completing my family and giving Sophia a sibling. And I just can't imagine my life without my brother, and so I just couldn't imagine her going through without a sibling. That for me was the big heartstrings tug of why we did all this. And so um, yeah, it was many years of me watching announcements too. And so yeah, I realize I see that on the back end. At the time it wasn't a thought. I was just like, here you go, finally an announcement. We're pregnant. But you've known that for
Yeah,
months because you know my
exactly.
HCG levels and everything.
Yeah. And those people you just, that followed along your journey and needed to create boundaries for themselves. I'm sure they did that. So you do
But
what you have to do.
and what's been really interesting is I think my mom at the time just had a hard time understanding all the science and this journey. But um my aunt would give my cousin like, when's she gonna have a third, or and my mom knew not to really talk about it and pressure, and because she just knew how that was hard for us, of people asking those questions and interjecting. So I think in some ways it was good for some of the family on both sides to see that you shouldn't really ask these questions, and everyone's journey is incredibly personal. I won't say which side, but I also have a cousin on one side who struggled, and they did, I think, 9 rounds of IUI.
Mm,
And they
mm,
finally have their child. But it made a lot more sense, I think, for my mom. Well, I guess I'm not outing it a little bit, but to know how hard um, that is, and
yeah.
how to be more supportive. I think, especially when in the Asian culture, especially, it's just not talked about.
Yeah.
Just not
Yeah.
talked about it.
It doesn't surprise me at all. A little bit that I know. So looking back on your younger self before going through all of this, is
Hmm.
there anything that you would have told her before you started this journey?
I think it was really naive, because I think when you grow up, they make it, society makes it seem like you get married and you have a kid, and I always joke birth control was the biggest scam I ever paid for.
Yeah.
Wish I had known
Totally.
a lot more about that. But I think, first I would say that it might not be easy. I wish I had known that. I wish I had educated myself more on what all this was. I never knew a lot. I don't think I knew what IVF was growing up. You don't hear it. So it's just, I wish I had known a little bit more, about how hard it could be. And, culturally, it was isolating at times because I felt like no one understood. I didn't have anyone immediate around me who's been through that. I was kind of the first one. And so that part was really isolating, which was why the internet and social media world was my outlet on how I found support. You can only hear so much, like, just be patient, don't stress out. And, I remember one time being at a lunch with an aunt, and just the constant, like, you got to have a second, you got to have, Sophia needs a brother or sister. And then I would say, like, but it's not easy. We're going to need to get some help. And no, you don't. Just, and I got angry at one point. I said, we will need medical help, period. And I think that the dad was like, shh, shh, and it was just so frustrating because it's like you're fighting the fight to defend yourself, but nothing's really wrong with you. You just need the help. And I think that's the other point. When you go through this, nothing's wrong with you. I think there's a huge, people want to say, like, what was wrong? It might not be anything wrong. It's just the circumstances. And I want it normalized. I think IVF, the option to do IVF and genetic testing should be normalized. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. So I think, that's what I would really tell my younger self is nothing's wrong with you. And, I wish I had just grown up with a little more awareness of, reproduction. And it's not just what you see in movies. And like, I just finished Bridgerton, right? And she had like one cycle where, like, oh, I didn't have the baby yet, and oh, I got pregnant the next time. Like, no, it does not happen that way, no matter how much romance you have.
Exactly. And if it does happen for you, well, you're like one, and I don't know how, how many. So it doesn't usually happen that way.
No, it doesn't, right? I think the other thing is, so it was so fascinating for me as I shared it so openly, how people would share back. And you probably get this on your platform. Like, people just DM you out of the blue. I had people DM me who I haven't talked to in decades, right? And they're telling me, like, oh, I'm so glad you're sharing this. This is what I'm going through. And they're getting support from me. And like, you realize like you said, you're actually not in the minority. This is more common than people realize. It's just, we just don't talk about it.
That's right. It's true. It's very true. And that, for me, this has been such a learning, just it's been a lesson for me, because it took me many, many years to share my story, because like you, it was 10 years ago. Social media isn't where it's at, where it wasn't what it is. So, I was very isolated, and there was nobody that I knew, at least there was nobody who was talking about it, who had issues with their fertility. My friends were having kids young. So I was always the godmother, the great godmother. So my mom, everybody was like, well, you shouldn't have any issues. I don't see why you would have any issues, So yeah, it's I'm so thankful that I finally have gotten it out there, and that has been so freeing to be able to talk about it. So normalizing it, I think that's happening little by little. And with just these conversations, I think they're impacting people from people all over the world, which is totally fascinating. And along with what you said, I mean, I do also get DMs with women who say, I'm sharing my story now, and you've encouraged me to share my story. And that, that makes it worth it. That makes it worth it, because with that becomes healing, and it just keeps on. It's just a gift that keeps on giving, because you'll touch somebody who you never knew you would, and then that person touches somebody else. So yeah, it does
It is
great
really
things.
healing. It's because it's especially with a culture that doesn't talk about it at all, really, and
For
then a
sure.
culture that doesn't understand that it's not easy because it was easy for them, right?
Right.
I just felt a lot less isolated. So it
That's
was it
good.
was a way to find some support and learn about what is my RE saying? What does this all mean? What is a good amount of eggs? What should I be looking for? And it was just a
Yeah.
way to feel support.
Totally. Totally. So if there's anything different, what would you tell someone going through or about to go through their own infertility process?
So I wrote some of this stuff down. So
Yeah,
first, you're definitely not alone. I think hopefully what people get from this is you are not alone. You're among probably a lot more company than you think. Um, and then like I said, nothing's wrong with you. Never feel that way about yourself. I think especially with that second OB, I felt like she was pointing out things wrong with me. And I felt really judged by her. And that brings me to my next point in this is change providers, like get with who you feel comfortable with, because especially when you're making the choice of an RE and that office, you're gonna be there a lot. You're gonna
okay.
you're gonna be in communication with them a lot. They're gonna know a lot about you. You're gonna build a relationship with this office, with this staff. And so if you don't feel comfortable with a provider at any time, like find someone you are, because a part of that for me was, I know firsthand there are people who do not like my RE, but I appreciated her. And I think it's funny that my first OB, 5 years ago said, if you're going to need help, you're going to want to see this doctor. He's like, I think you will click with her. And he was right, because I really did appreciate her style. And it's just so funny that he had just had that insight to know that that's who could be helpful for me. And she was.
Yeah.
Um, so, just feel that it's sometimes hard in this journey to feel empowered, but feel empowered to make that decision when you're not comfortable with the provider, or you're not comfortable with an OB, to say, I need, I just want to be with someone else, or just make that appointment with someone else.
Yeah.
And then I would just say I send lots of love, because it's such a hard journey, and I just want them to know that I was cheered on by people, and I cheer people on just as much. You're not alone, and you're surrounded, even if it's internet strangers, you're surrounded by a lot of love and women and other partners who want to see you have success.
Yeah. That's good. That's such good information. I mean, I wish I heard those things going into my journey. So I know that's going to go a long way with other women who are about to start. Thank you, Christina. Thank you so much for your time and just your wisdom and your knowledge
Thank
of
you.
all that you've experienced.
Thanks for
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
platform. I've always been open. I've reached out to podcasts and stuff to share, and just hasn't worked out. And so I was just really excited that this actually came to fruition.
Yay. Is there an Instagram handle or anything that you would like to share with others?
Sure. It's at I am Christina J, but it's I_am_Christina J on Instagram.
Okay.
And I'm I feel like I'm pretty much open book. You'll see the life of Emmy and Sophia. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure, I'm sure there will be others who would want to say hi or ask a question or anything like that. What area are you in, by the way?
San Diego.
That's right, San Diego. So if anybody's in San Diego and is curious about who you saw, they might ask.